Hello, today we're gonna check how fast must Europe arm to deter Russia. European leaders have endorsed the year 2030 as the year in which Europe needs to be able to defend itself in a pure conflict. The data show that Europe would only be fit for war in several decades. Which the year of 2030 by specialists is predicted for the need to be ready for war. Russia continues to outproduce four European countries across multiple weapon systems. We demonstrate that the production must increase by a factor of around 5 to tilt the balance decisively in Europe's favor. From where this data, report Kiel Institute, and the report is called Fit for War by 2030, European rearmament efforts vis-a-vis Russia. So what we're gonna cover here in this video today, the punchline of this article. Then we're gonna go to track the Russian military buildup. Another one will be existing stock in European military capabilities. Next one will be domestic market or import, meaning that we're gonna check which countries produce internally weapons or import weapon and what's the proportion. And the last one gonna be expected delivery and production and European production. So first, the punchline of this article. There are three punchlines. First one is bottom-up estimates of spending needs on selected weapon systems shows that the price differences between similar types of equipment are very large. In our estimates, the predicted 800 billion under the EU European Readiness 2030 program will be too small. If equipment is bought at the current high price, Europe thus needs to focus on cost effectiveness of procurement. Finally, European investments in military research and development are limited compared to other major powers. In 2024, in example, European invested 13 billion in military research and development, but the latest figures shows that the USA invested, for example, 145 billion in 2023, or China invested 21 billion in 2024. So these numbers are significantly higher, and neither neglected and underfunded military research and development for a decade or more as most European countries did. Second punchline of this article is that the Russian military has grown qualitatively and quantitatively significantly since production has doubled across the board or increased even further, as in the case of tanks. Surprisingly, Russian spending is almost the same as the of the EU and UK measured in purchasing power parity. So you see how much more expensive are the weapons in European Union or UK comparing to Russia. And the third punchline of this article, military strategy and technology are evolving rapidly. Military planners must modernize weapons and strategy with simultaneously scaling existing and effective systems. A major challenge for often slow and bureaucratic procurement structures. Investments in European technology is essential for modernization. European weapons tend to be expensive due to low production volumes in a fragmented market. Low production volumes and bureaucratic structures are the reason why most of the Polish purchases in the military area are done on USA or South Korea market. But we'll get to it later when we're gonna talk about purchases and suppliers. Okay, then let's check the Russian military buildup. Russian tank production has peaked at nearly 150 per month, while that of other armored vehicles of 550 per month. Russian production of artillery of all types has reached 56 per month, but it's notable that corresponding Ukrainian production of the wheeled Bogdana howitzer has reached 20 per month. So the data is actually very interesting because Russian production of artillery is 56 per month and Ukrainian is 20 per month. So taking into account European production, this indicates that while Russia has had a significant quantitative head start in artillery, its capabilities can be matched by combined Ukrainian and European production. This is interesting because most of the artillery which is produced in Europe is produced by Ukraine, by the country which is under the war and has to spread its production over all the country because it's bombarded all the time. Russian production relies to a variable degree of retrofits, reaching up to an estimated 80% for tanks and systems that rely on tank hulls, such as tracked self-propelled artillery. 80%. So these systems are taken out of storage and modernized to the current battlefield by the addition of improved armor, sensors, and electric warfare capabilities. This is very significant because a lot of weapon from the Russian army, also by European army, and also by Ukrainian army supported by Europe, is very, very old. If we take tanks, they are often tanks. Well, it's not like the biggest number, but they are tanks taken from museum to the war. So the tanks from Ukraine are the same. The post-Soviet tanks, and also let's say like Leopard, German tanks, Leopard first edition. It also has like 50 years. So from both sides, we have a lot of old weapons, and as we see, a lot of weapons in Russian military is on retrofits. So this is finite resources, however, limited by what the Red Army left behind and likely to constrain Russian ambitions from 2026 onwards. This is measured, I just put a digression to this data. This is measured by satellite photos, for example, for open spaces warehouses where Russians stock their army resources. So this might be not precise. I mean, Russia could just hide their tanks or could do something which you just clearly don't see, but it's visible also on the tanks which are coming to the area, because if we see that there are coming new weapons in Russia, the new weapons are destroyed more. Percentage of new weapons are destroyed than the old ones. We see that actually the old things which can be renewed or modernized are going to be finished soon. Well, I hope soon. Nonetheless, the decision to increase the semi-annual conscription classes in 2025 to 160,000 strongly indicates that Moscow is contemplating post-conflict force generation. So we see also this from the other important decision of Putin, that Putin is not going to stop, is not thinking about stopping the war, and is preparing for a long-range, long-time lasting conflict. In September, for example, 2024, Putin issued a decree to increase the number of active service members in the Russian military by 180,000 from 1,320,000 to 1,500,000 soldiers. In April 2025, the Kremlin announced major new funding for the Navy, 90 billion euro through 2050 for expansion and modernization. As expected, according to Soviet and Russian doctrinal tradition, the first focus will be on the strategic nuclear forces. There are rumors and researches from the specialists that they have really huge problems because the nuclear weapons are really old and they might be not able to turn on a lot of them. So each year, actually, Putin has taken decisions which are putting the Russian country more into the war economy. Let's go to existing stocks in European military capabilities. This is what is interesting. As for the four considered countries, so we talk about the biggest powers, military powers in Europe, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland. And actually, those are the powers which might be able to stand and face the Russian army, because this is not so easy as the article here describes. They don't go so much into the politics here in this article, but there is a very big different approach of the Western countries, Eastern countries, Western Europe countries, Eastern Europe countries, and let's say South European countries to the war against Russia. Right? If we look on the percentage of spending of on the military from the South Europe, and if we look on their opinions and support to the Ukraine, we'll see that this is the smallest part. The Eastern Europe, from the other hand, is the biggest percentage of the military spendings are going to Eastern Europe versus their GDP. And also the Western Europe didn't launch their spendings so quickly. We'll go to it later. Actually, we'll go to it now in this point. That the first countries, of course, the most threatened countries from the Eastern Europe started to launch the military programs and buy and purchase military weapons, while the Western countries didn't want to do it for a long time until they were not convinced by, and here is a dilemma, by the Eastern countries or by their citizens, by the Western countries' citizens, because there was a big social media action towards support to Ukraine, while this support was already done in the Western countries, also citizens. The Western countries' governments didn't want to follow that change, and as we see, they followed that change long time after and started to buy weapons long time after the war started. Okay, let's check it out. So, for the four countries considered in this most powerful countries in Europe, the numbers of main battle tank or infantry fighting vehicles is the same or even smaller than in 2021, so the year before the war. In the case of howitzers and multiple launch rocket system, only Poland has increased its stocks with the acquisition of the South Korean K9 and Krab self-propelled howitzers, which is produced in Poland, and the multi-launch rocket system Homar K. In air defense, numbers have increased in Poland and Germany, but not in France and the UK. EU institutions have advanced programs for European satellite capabilities, the IMIS. Well, advanced programs. Let's see how it's advanced. The scale of the programs is, however, limited compared to Starlink, the American competitor, with already more than 7,000 low Earth satellites versus the less than 300 initially expected from IMIS. So right now, the European satellite capacities is more than 20 few times slower than has Starlink. Moreover, the expansion of the space industry is ongoing worldwide, with projects in China aiming at having 648 low Earth satellites by the end of 2025. And thousands in 2030. So the Chinese program is planned to progress very quickly. So even the China has more satellites than European satellite capacities. Okay, procurement activity for the four countries. Germany. Order volume fell of the procurement activity between January 2020 and June 2021. Germany ordered 47.8 billion, whereas between January 2022 and June 2023, so a year where the war happens, orders totaled 27.3 billion, so it's big fell. So fall the military value orders when the war started, and during the year after, this is very important to understand what were the politics in Europe. This is what I was talking about. While East flank, Poland, Baltic countries, Romania has increased arming purchases. Germany, France didn't want to join the common initiative. They wanted to keep business as usual, keeping the Nord Stream, keeping the contracts for the oil and the other fuels or minerals with Russia. This has changed, but it took a long time after the war started. A substantial increase, and it's mainly important to mention, the change probably wouldn't come if not the citizens of the Western Europe wouldn't push their governments. So this is from one side very happy change, very happy to see that change for me as a Eastern European citizen because the government still didn't feel this unity in Europe, but the Western governments in total in Europe as a general, but the citizens of the Western countries feel it, the Western European countries. Okay, so a substantial increase in order volume and frequency began in spring 2023. So around this time, Germany woke up or has been waken up. From March 2023 to February 2024, Germany made military purchases worth 45.9 billion, and this grew in 12 months thereafter to 55.5 billion. In the whole period since the war started, from March 2022 to April 2025, 148 orders containing 218 items were placed for a total volume of 122.7 billion. The key results of the orders is that the ordering activity of the last 2.5 years has barely changed the stocks available to the German army. In most instances, they have merely been enough to replace the reduction in stocks due to commitments to Ukraine. So the point is that actually the army didn't grow up, the German army. It's rather replaced the stocks due to the commitments to Ukraine. United Kingdom. A noticeable and permanent increase in order volume is apparent after the invasion began in February 2022. So this is different than in German decisions of governments. Order volume grew from 5.8 billion of pounds. Earlier it was euro, all the data. In the 12 months preceding the invasion to 15.2 billion across March 2022 to February 2023. So it's almost grew 3 times in the year when the war started. While this was followed by a fall to 9.4 billion in 12 months thereafter, still much higher than pre-invasion. March 2024 to February 2025 saw over 20 billion of pounds of orders made. 3.6 billion of orders have been made in March and April 2025. Sea power is by far the main priority in procurement, in the UK procurement, which nearly half of all recorded spending going towards the Royal Navy before that period. The majority of spending was dedicated to the land army. So we see here that if war will start against Russia with NATO, UK wants to fight on the UK doesn't want to fight on the land and leave the biggest burden to the Eastern Europeans. Ukrainians, Polish people, or Eastern European countries are not most important ally to the UK in Europe, which is not surprise historically if you look on it from the perspective of the Eastern Europeans. Okay, now we talk about Poland. Yeah, Poland. Investment in land capabilities is the main priority in the Polish procurement. Not surprised, right? We have Poland already a border with Russia, with Kaliningrad region, and Russian units are stationed there. Polish stocks are likely to increase in the coming years. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has marked a turning point in Polish procurement. In other major European countries do not increase, if other European countries do not increase their stocks accordingly, this would place Poland as the first European army in size in terms of some major military equipment in the land forces, which is actually true. They overtaken a bit the other armies, mostly German, UK, or France. There's a shift in spending to the land army, as we would probably face Russia, as Poland would probably face Russian soldiers like Ukrainians do now. We can highlight the purchases of MLRS around 300 Homar KS and framework agreement for almost 500 units of HIMARS. MBT, more than 300, so main battle tanks, more than 300 Abrams and 180 K2 tanks from Korea, with 800 more yet to be purchased as a part of framework agreement. Here there are some updates which I think this report didn't take into consideration. It will be around 360 K2 tanks from what is latest information I see. So much less from the South Korea, which was the framework agreement. But this is the framework agreement. It's only showing what is the biggest possible purchase, not the final one, which mostly is smaller. So, and also it's connected a bit to the budget cuts. So the done by government, which overtook these military purchase plans after previous one. The Polish debt is growing up rapidly, and it was the biggest in the history last year and this year. The acquisition of South Korean howitzers is similarly remarkable, with more than 350 purchased between 222 and 224. For air defense, Poland has purchased 6 Patriot systems as a part of the Wisła air defense program. Also remarkable is the purchase of 96 AH-64A Apache, mostly people know it under the name Apache, ATA helicopters in 2024. This is something amazing for me and for specialists also. This is the huge purchase of the Apache helicopters. There are a lot of critics from specialists why Poland buy the most expensive helicopters in the world in such a big number. Okay, let's go further. In the case of the Air Force, 2 major acquisitions stand out: the purchase of the 48 FA-50 South Korean aircraft in 2022, as well as the 32 F-35 aircrafts purchased in 2020. In the case of the sea forces, 3 frigates and 2 naval missiles units constitute the major investments. While these major investments are also important because most of the energy supply is done by seaside in Poland. It was different before the war, before the Russia attacked Ukraine, and Poland cut off the trade with the Russia. Let's say the supply from the Russia of the gas and oil. It was going through the land, and it was going not only to the Poland, like to the other countries, like to the Germany and the other Western Europe countries, and it was going through the Poland. But since the Russia attacked Ukraine, it was huge shift to supply the energy, the gas, the oil through the sea. So that's why Poland also making major investments in naval power. While further investments might be needed, we can expect major deliveries of equipment to Poland in the next 5 years, with considerable increases in MLRS and MBT, or self-propelled howitzers. So mostly the land army. France. To our knowledge, says the report, in the case of military procurement in France, there is no comparable level of transparency to that of Germany, the UK, or Poland. Specific budget allocations to the different purchases are not always made available. While we sometimes can track procurement orders for certain items using Ministry of Defense new announcements, in many cases the data is just not publicly available on a consistent basis. This is especially true for data for the monetary amounts of orders. What we can find, however, is an overview of quantities of different military items ordered and delivered in a given year from the annexes of the military equipment budgets published by the French Ministry of Defense. The current military programming law from 2020, which ranged from 2024 to 2030, allocates a total of 113 euro billion until 2030, which represents a 80% increase from the previous period. But this is a plan. As we see, the France purchases are not so big, are not so rapid. France also has a big budget deficit and some debt, and it's a problematic to buy a new weapon, as we see. We go now to domestic market or import. So the country summary procurement. So who imports, who produce inside of the country. The current imports from European countries are nowhere close to the 50-70% of total equipment purchases indicated in the reports. The highest share of imports to defense equipment expenditure we find is for Poland. Yes, Poland, due to actually rapid procurement, military purchases, Poland, and due to lowered capabilities and ability to produce their military, because Poland was quite a big producer of weapons in the communism time, and in 90s we started the huge sell-off of the military capabilities, and generally we sold most of the, let's say, communism heritage in factories and all other things. So the same touched also military, also the economy, also the old things which we see no need for in coming years, coming decades, were sold. It's important also to say, if you want to understand the Polish economy and history of Polish economy, that it was sold very, very cheap. And a lot of things were corrupted, and there was a lot of corruption in that. That's privatization, right? So changing the market from communism to capital. There are estimates that the value of those communistic factories, communistic companies, were sold of a price of 10% of real price. But let's go to Germany. About half of procurement in Germany is from domestic German companies, while only a relatively small part of equipment spending, 60%, is from foreign producers without any German involvement in the production. UK. Procurement in the UK is even more clearly titled towards domestic producers than in Germany. Around 50% of spending is to domestic companies in our sample, and UK companies and foreign partnership come second at 47%, with only a very small part of purchasing coming straight from foreign producers. Poland's military purchases stand in stark contrast to the UK and Germany. Unfortunately, they were mainly directed to foreign providers, in particular to the USA and South Korea. About 69% of all purchases were directed to foreign companies. This includes both land, like tanks, howitzers, transport, and attack helicopters, as well as aircraft, F-35 or F-50 aircrafts, or air defense systems. The production of some of these weapons is being manufactured in Poland and by Polish companies in some of these cases. This is also important to say that not only the changes in selling the communistic factors which are producing tanks or other weapons for Soviet Union, also the purchases are coming from foreign companies because they wouldn't be delivered so quickly by even the European companies, because most of the foreign purchases are not done in Europe for Poland, but from United States and South Korea. So the Europe cannot produce and supply Poland in such a quick time, with such a big numbers, with few hundred tanks, almost 1,000 tanks, which was initially, it is gonna be smaller, but few hundred tanks, few hundred howitzers, and other things like HIMARS, few hundred HIMARS initially was meant to buy. So there was no factory, no country which could produce it in Europe, and this is also important for the European politics, because there is a huge issue with that the European Union wants to centralize the production in European countries, so it will not import, right, from states or from other countries. And Poland is the biggest example why they do it. So there are programs now, there are rules which will be in that programs that money European Union will support military factors, military economies in Europe. But if the things will be produced in Europe, not imported. Okay, let's go further. Around 70% of the non-European purchases from Poland are contracted with USA companies, and the remaining mainly with South Korean firms. That's what I was telling about. Lockheed Martin and Boeing account for most of the US purchases, and Hanwha Aerospace and Hyundai Rotem for those from South Korea. Sorry if I spelled Hanwha, for sure I spelled wrongly, but pardon. The orders allocated to national companies refer mainly to either the public holding company PGZ or Huta Stalowa Wola, a subsidiary company from PGZ. So mostly PGZ, which gathers all of the most of the companies, military companies in Poland, under one big holding company. France. Finally, France show almost no reliance on foreign non-European partners. The majority of French procurement is contracted with French companies or alternatively with European ones. The case of purchases for major equipment like transport aircraft, A400M or Airbus, combat aircraft, Rafale Dassault, I think so, it's spelled like this, or self-propelled howitzers, Caesar, Nexter, relate to equipment for which both development and manufacture are known to be done by French companies. France tried to internalize the production. Another point is, and the last point, is expected delivery and European production. For Germany items with both an earliest and latest expected delivery date, 40 per 2% of total, the average delivery time is around 3 years, and no official latest delivery date is provided for 50% of items. For British items with both an earliest and latest expected delivery date, 36% of total, the average delivery time is around 3-4 years, and no official latest delivery date is provided for 53% of items. For Polish items, the average delivery time is around 3 years from when the equipment has been ordered. So as we see, most of them are the official delivery date is around 3-4 years, which ranging for not even a half of delivery expected percentage of weapons for British and German companies. So the Poland will be the fastest to arm itself. Now let's check the European production. Gradually growing production capacity. An increase has occurred for artillery share production. Artillery share production in Europe is now substantially larger than that of the USA, but still somewhat smaller than the combined Russian-North Korean production. We know from the latest news, that the North Korea had huge impact on the artillery share supply to Russia. It was few million, if I am not mistaken, 4 or 5 million shells delivered to Russia. Without it, Russia wouldn't be able to outnumber the Ukraine artillery, which Russia actually did, because there were times, especially in 2023 and 4, that the Russia outnumbered in artillery few times the Ukraine. The Ukraine number of shots, let's say artillery, was sometimes 5 to 10 times smaller than Russia, because Ukraine was missing the shells, and Europe couldn't deliver the shell to Ukraine. When it comes to main battle tanks, European production is concentrated on the Leopard 2A8 with an annual expected production of 50. In the USA, the reported substantial production of Abrams tanks has increased substantially, reaching 135 units per year. These numbers are substantially smaller than Russian production output numbers. When it comes to fighter jets, no clear increase in production output is visible for the 4 most prominent Western combat aircraft. A reduced or even completely missing technological lead in warfare is becoming an increasing concern across Western militaries, and is particularly an issue for Europe. Because Europe was mostly, adding to the article, was sleeping and didn't have any threat, didn't see any threat from the Russia, which didn't want to see actually, because it's seen the threats. I mean, the USA intelligence has given Europe, to the few countries of Europe, including Ukraine and Western European countries, information that the Russia is preparing the war. They knew it around half year earlier, and they were sure about it. And most of the leaders didn't believe that, including Zelensky, didn't believe that the Russia would attack. And Zelensky has taken wrong decision, because he was shifting the funds from military to infrastructure before the war. So that was that's another topic, more political. And the last thing I want to say, this is important: drones production. Increased use of drones. The use of drones in the invasion of Ukraine was rather modest at the beginning of the conflict, but it has steadily increased. The use of drones by Russia has increased by a factor of 8 between September 2023 and March 2025. To keep up with the extensive use, drone production has experienced sharp increase both in Russia and Ukraine. For instance, the target for production of first-person view drones in Ukraine for 2025 is around 4.5 million, while that for Russia is between 3 and 4 million, with the levels of production at the beginning of the war being much more limited. Drones appear critical, and according to reports, are now responsible for 60-70% of damage currently caused to Russian equipment, which before was to artillery. The same 69% around was to the artillery, now it's to the drones. At the same time, military analysts in Ukraine stress the complementary nature of drone artillery and armored vehicles. So there is a big technological shift in war in Ukraine, Well, this is changing all the time actually. In beginning it was different. The drones were in there. The artillery was very important. Of course, people are very important. The army is very important, but the weapons changes. The same like HIMARS changed the landscape in beginning of this war. Later on, it was drones, right? In beginning, the artillery was in favor of Ukraine because they had the artillery from Europe, from Western Europe or from Europe generally, which could shoot, which had range longer than a Russian artillery, and that was the favor. Later on, it didn't matter so much because Russia has implemented, for example, CAP, so the bombs. The bombs started from the aircraft, which were like half-ton bombs and could easily destroy all the positions, Ukrainian positions, and allowed Russians to move further and to attack quicker and move further through the Ukrainian territory. Guys, that's all. This report and in generally this video should concern everyone who is keeping fingers for Europe, because as it was mentioned, Europe must arm 5 times quicker to deter Russia and its capabilities. I hope it will change. Thank you very much, guys, for seeing. If you didn't subscribe, if you didn't like my channel, please do it. And hope to hear you and see you again.